When the three convalescents returned from the hospital, pale and shaky, David summoned them to his office. At the door, Watchguard Jones looked over them. "Say, that blue Martian fever sure does take it out of you. You fellows look like you've been plenty sick." "They have been," said David. "Let them by so they can sit down and rest." Jones moved aside, but he lounged in the doorway, listening. David ignored him. "Glad to see you back, gentlemen. I'll make this brief. You have been the victims of a laboratory accident, just as much as if you have been contaminated with radiation. Our leader Marley, who understands the problems of all categories, has very generously consented to grant you 2 weeks' convalescence, in addition to a free choice. Take a few minutes to think over your decision." He strolled over to the window and looked out at the green of the trees, just bursting into leaf. Then, as if on impulse, he turned back. "While you're thinking it over, will you look at these protocols? We discussed them before you got sick. Do you remember? A plan to prevent an epidemic of blue Martian? Do you approve of the final form? I'd like to carry on, and after all," he added with an ironic smile, "it's getting later than we might think." He handed each man a sheet of paper whose contents were identical. They studied them. Carl Haslam was the first to speak. "Do you think, then, that other cases of blue Martian may develop? It is certainly probable. Those faffy insects were never caught." Carl looked back at his paper. It contained a list of names, some of which were well known to all the country, some of them obscure. Thoughtfully, he nodded as he ran down the list. Hudson glanced up, frowning. His finger pointed at one name. "I don't know," he said slowly, "that this particular experiment would prove useful. Surely the Lanza method has not proved to be as effective as we once hoped. You may be right, but there is the bare possibility that the modified Lanza method might be of an enormous benefit to us. It is uncertain, too much of a risk. That is my opinion." "Then I'll reconsider. The rest has your approval? Very well. And now what choice have you made for your holiday?" "I think we all agree," said Carl somberly. "We'll have an aimless tramp." "An excellent idea," approved David. "Oh, Jones, will you get an air cab to take the doctors to Bureau Med, and then arrange for their roboplanes to be serviced and ready in an hour?" "I don't know as I ought to leave my post," said Jones. "You'd rather stay with us and perhaps be exposed to the fever?" Okay. When his footsteps had died away, David leaned forward. "We've done our best. Another month or so and we should be completely ready for our retirement act." "As if we have a month," said Fourier. David grinned. "Well, if our time runs out, at least we'll go down fighting. You know all your lines, your props are ready, the plot is worked out, and we can slip into our makeup in an instant, provided the audience shows up." "You're getting to be quite a joker, David," said Carl. "What if the audience comes around to the stage door?" "Then we'll try to receive him properly. Our leader is a man of iron, but I doubt he is immortal." They heard the approaching guard. "I'm sure you'll benefit from your holiday," David went on. That last checkup showed an antibody titer entirely too high for safety. In other words, it's time for us to get going, asked Carl, smiling. That's right. Only the next time the antibody curve rises, it will be for keeps. 4 days later, it was reported that Judge Brinton, the well-known champion of category rights, was ill with blue Martian fever. 3 little-known nuclear physicists living in the same apartment in Oak Ridge developed symptoms on the same day. Sporadic cases of blue Martian flared up all over the continent. Occasionally, a whole family was affected, husband, wife, and all the children. There was a mild epidemic at MIT, a more serious one at the School of Social Structure, and at Harvard Medical School, nearly a third of the senior class, and they, the most brilliant, were hospitalized at the same time. Rumors blanketed the country like a fog, and people everywhere became uneasy. There were no deaths from the illness, but the very idea that an infectious disease could flare up unpredictably all over the nation, out of control, was frightening. It was said that the disease had been beamed to Earth by alien enemies from space, that all its victims became sterile or their minds were permanently damaged. It was also said, though people laughed even as they repeated the rumor, that if you once had blue Martian fever, you'd become immortal. This particular theory had been clearly traced to the ravings of a red-haired madwoman who was confined to the psycho-detention. But still, it was too ridiculous not to repeat. For a week, comedians rang 100 changes on the basic joke. Wife, drop dead. Husband, I can't. I've had blue Martian. The unrest became so great that Leader Marley himself appeared on the Telecaster to reassure the nation. He was an impressive figure on the lighted screen, resting solid and at ease in a leather chair, raising his massive black head, lifting his big hand to gesture as his rich voice rolled out. You have nothing to fear, he said. Under your beneficent leaders, infectious disease has been wiped out many years ago. Bureau Med informs me these scattered cases of blue Martian fever have been caused by the escape of a few faffy insects, which have, since then, been isolated and destroyed. The illness has no serious after effects. And as for the rumors that it confers immortality, he allowed his face to break into a pitying smile as he slowly shook his head, looking regretfully and yet somehow amused. Those who continue to spread gossip about the fever will only reveal themselves either psychotics or traitors. Whichever they are, they will be isolated for the good of our society. The effects of his words were somewhat diminished by the brief glimpse people had of Dr. Lanza, who reached a hand to help the leader rise. For Dr. Lanza wore an anxious frown, and his face was thin with worry. In spite of numerous arrests, the rumors continued. For 2 weeks, sporadic outbreaks of the fever occurred, and then, abruptly, they ceased.